Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Abe Goldberg. I serve as director of the James Madison Center for Civic Engagement here at James Madison University. Our mission is to educate and inspire people to address public issues and cultivate a just and inclusive democracy. Today, we are so fortunate to be joined by a candidate for the 2021 gubernatorial race who is going to address questions from moderators and those of you on Facebook Live who would like to enter them into the chat. I would like to thank my colleague, Dr. Carol Whaley, for getting us started, and allow me to please introduce our moderators. First, we have Kyle Ford, who is going to be a 2021 grad majoring in economics. We are also joined by Ryan Ritter, sophomore international affairs, and with a minor in Arabic. Both of them are democracy fellows with us here at JMU Civic. Thank you all so much for joining us, and I will turn it over to our moderators.
Mr. Santini.
Yes, sir.
Hi there. So, Virginia has seen more than 280,000 COVID-19 cases, and we have lost over 4,400 Virginians. What lessons have you learned from how Virginia and the country have handled the pandemic, and how should such lessons inform how we approach crises in the future?
So first, let me thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure. To address that, there's a lot of lessons learned here. First, data is really important, and how we project that data to the public is, I think the ball was dropped on that in our current situation. And because of that, there's a lot of confusion about what's true, what's not true, and there's a lot of division caused from that. That I think is one of the biggest things, because people are not going to follow a recommendation if the data doesn't back that up in a way that they understand it. And that is the biggest issue that we're having across the state in regards to what's real and what's not with COVID. You've got people that are divided by the 6% statement from the CDC. Well, only 6% of people have died from it. Well, when you look at a bell curve, which is what a lot of doctors use in determining what cause of death is, that's true. But that's also true with any other disease that follows along with it. Second is they're not putting out information on things like pre-morbidity, underlying conditions, and things of that nature in regards to COVID. So the numbers are really inflated, or at least there are people out there that believe they're inflated. And that's causing more division. And what that division is doing is it's causing, people to get pepper sprayed, people to get beat up. It's literally hurting people in a physical manner. So what we have to do is we have to focus on the data, and we have to put it out in a way that not only people with an education understand from this culture, but people with a different education in a different culture isn't going to understand the same way as, a college educated person in comparison to the kid that graduated high school and has been, working on a farm his whole life. Not to say he's not just as smart, but the reality is that cultural difference in understanding of how things are portrayed needs to be addressed when we're dealing with issues like COVID and any other future problems we may run into.
And I apologize. I actually didn't introduce you, and that's my
That's all right.
Kurt is a father, husband, a military veteran, and concerned citizen. At 19, Kurt earned his GED and then joined the Army at the age of 20. Although short, during his military career, he excelled in his training and is proud to be a member of the 175th Army Ranger Special Operations Unit. In 2000, a parachute malfunction caused a severe spinal cord injury that left him medically unfit for duty and disabled. For 18 years, he struggled with Veterans Affairs healthcare system.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Santini, for being here.
Great to be here.
Of course. Over the past year, our country has faced a national reckoning concerning race relations, and Virginia has seen multiple protests about racial injustice, the removal of Confederate monuments, and inequalities exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. What makes you well positioned to address these issues and move the Commonwealth forward?
So, what makes me so well positioned is I have a greater understanding than most people. My family is very multicultural. I have a black grandfather, biracial aunt, multiracial cousins, um, and they're from all walks of life. From the people that are dependent on Medicaid and government assistance to people that own mansions in my family. Having that background allows me to see different points of view and have a greater understanding of what my family is going through because I'm talking to them about it. I'm listening to what issues are hurting them, and I'm listening to the ideas that they have with how to fix that. Um, so I've been to Richmond. I've walked the streets with the protesters. I've spoken with the protesters. Um, Most of them don't believe in the Black Lives Matter organization, the socialist Marxist thing, but they do know that the Black Lives Matter movement is raising their voice for real concerns and real issues and real problems that need to be addressed. Um, in regards to COVID-19 and that's really insignificant in comparison to the issues and problems that our black communities are facing. And we need to focus on education. We need to focus on uh, not just childhood K through 12 education, but postgraduate education. You've got a lot of adults that are coming out of high school in these communities that can't even read. And if they are reading, they're reading at a third grade level. That's an issue. We got to stop treating our children as numbers just to get them on to the next grade and start treating them as individuals. And I'll talk more about that on education issues later. But yeah, having that multicultural background, having the ability to understand the different cultural languages that they're talking about, I, that's what makes me the guy that is going to be able to actually help people, not just listen to something and say there's no solution.
One of your priorities in your campaign is term limits. Currently, Virginia limits terms for governors, but not for members of the General Assembly. Can you share why term limits would be a priority for you as a governor and how you would work to pass legislation in the Commonwealth to enact term limits?
Yes, sir. So I've been traveling our state for the past couple of years, and a lot of what people are talking about is career corruption, career politics. They're flip-flopping when they get in there. They're not voting. Their voting record isn't what they're stating that it is. And in some cases, these politicians are flat out lying to the people. How much of that is true really doesn't matter. That's the perception that the people have. Whether you're a Democrat and you think Republicans are corrupt, or you're a Republican and you think Democrats are corrupt. It all comes down to the same thing. How do you get rid of that division of Republican versus Democrat and actually start to work on the issues? Well, that's where term limits come in. Under term limits, you have to go through the process where the legislators put it in a bill, that bill gets signed into effect for it to be put on the ballot, and then the people have to vote on whether they want term limits or not. The problem is you've got career corrupt politicians that don't want to give up that power, so it's never getting accomplished. I think what I'm going to have to do is declare a state of emergency. We're so divided as a state. All the riots we're having, all the disruption and distrust between the election fraud, the 42 counts of election fraud that have occurred here, whether you believe that or you don't, that distrust is caused by the division between Republican and Democrat. So we're going to force it down their throat. They're going to have to write the bill, and the people are going to have to stand up and fight with me. They're going to have to call, protest their legislators to say, this is what we want. They're telling me on the street, day in and day out, both Republican and Democrat, I have just as many Democrats willing to vote for me right now as I do Republicans. And you know I'm running on a Republican ticket, but they know that enacting term limits is going to erase that division. It's going to erase the indoctrination of every new politician coming in by a career politician telling you this is how it's done, this is how it's not done, and if you don't follow along, you're not going to get reelected. And people see that. The people are actually seeing that. When they go to the ballot, they're voting Democratic or they're voting Republican because they feel like it's their only choice. If I don't vote, then Republicans are going to get everything that they want. And if I don't vote, Democrats are going to get everything they want. In reality, what they want is unity. They want to start having the hard conversations and working to find solutions that don't violate our rights and that still give the people the progress that we need moving forward. Term limits does that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Santini, for that response. In September, the Virginia General Assembly once again voted down qualified immunity in the context of policing reforms. Opponents voiced concern that ending qualified immunity for police would open them up to petty lawsuits beyond legitimate claims of misconduct. Another priority of your campaign is to end qualified immunity. Can you share how ending qualified immunity would make government officials more accountable, and how would you work to pass this legislation with the General Assembly?
So, first off, I want to be very clear. I do not want to end qualified immunity for our law enforcement. My statement is directed to our legislators. A lot of people on the street are seeing them create laws that protect them from us, and we're going to jail and prison and being fined $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 for things like that. That delegate got pulled over for drinking and driving in Virginia last year. That's very upsetting for a person that you elect to represent you to get away from those laws that you're getting charged with and you're getting punished with. With that being said, I think we're going to move more towards the revisal part. And on my campaign page, I do say remove or revise because I'm willing to have the conversation with the people about either. Now, I had a conversation on the revisal part and why they think it's more likely we're going to revise qualified immunity than remove it. And that is because if we're in a deadlock vote 49-49 and somebody brings up a charge or one of these legislators get caught doing something that would otherwise put them in jail, then that breaks that vote and gives the other side an otherwise advantage that they wouldn't have. So what we would more be looking toward is revising it and limiting it to while they're in session, and but they're still going to be charged when that session is over. So that delegate that got pulled over for drinking and driving, as soon as the session was over, he goes to court, he pays his fine, he does his community service, he does his jail time for 30 days, just like everybody else. And what you can do in that revision is also put up a power of attorney delegating his authority if he does go to jail to, somebody else that can make that vote for him. Much like when the president is incapacitated, the vice president takes charge. Our delegates can have that same process. We just need to go through the steps of actually working through the issues and finding solutions to those smaller issues that might be standing in the way.
Thank you so much for that. In January 2020, more than 20,000 Virginians turned out in a protest at the state capitol in Richmond, and nearly every Virginia county has voted to declare itself a Second Amendment sanctuary for guns, in opposition to laws in the Commonwealth placing new limits on handgun purchases, establishing a red flag procedure to take firearms from people deemed a threat, allowing localities to restrict firearms in public spaces, and expanding background checks for gun sales. What are your positions on gun rights and gun safety, and what would you do as governor?
So first, let me address a couple of things here. What this tells you is a lot of different things outside of what I would do in legislation. It tells you, one, that the legislators aren't listening to the people. You had tens of thousands of people show up and protest against the laws that they were trying to pass, and they didn't have the conversation with us. They didn't have the conversation with our legislators that were fighting for our Second Amendment rights. They just went ahead and passed those laws. That's not a democracy, okay? That's a dictatorship, that's an oligarchy, and that is very bad for America. Two, this also tells you is the Second Amendment has never been amended. Nobody has ever changed it in the Constitution. Shall not be infringed is very, very clear. But it has been infringed upon over and over and over again to the point that the people have just accepted anytime a new law comes out. They get enough people to follow along with that law and say, I agree with that. So now the rest of the country has to agree with it as well, even though it did not go through the process of being voted on by the people and amended in the Constitution like it is supposed to be. We are a constitutional republic before we are a democracy. We utilize democracy to help our constitutional republic move forward. The problem is a lot of people are putting out that we're a democracy and they're bypassing the constitutional republic part of it. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Any law to the contrary is notwithstanding. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of laws that are in violation of our Constitution. You have to fix the Constitution, and that has to be voted on by the people before those laws are actually withstanding. So I'm obviously a very strong advocate for Second Amendment rights. I do believe that, we need to have the hard conversations about how we keep guns, firearms, weapons of all types out of people's hands that shouldn't have them. But at the same time, we have to understand that they have constitutional rights as well, and we can't just infringe on those rights when we decide that that person shouldn't have something. There has to be a process that we can come up with that doesn't infringe on their rights, but still protects the people from criminals of that nature. There's so much more that could be talked about this that's just being overlooked. And follow me on my campaign page, Santini4BA.com. We'll be talking about more of that in the future. And I thank you for the question, sir.
Absolutely.
Mr. Santini, as a veteran, and thank you so much for your service, you've seen firsthand the shortcomings of the healthcare system for those who have served this country, and you're advocating for reforms for the VA system. How would you accomplish better care for veterans as governor?
So what we need to do is we need to look at a state system where your service-connected veterans can go to any doctor, any primary care in the state, and never get charged. What will happen then is the state will pay that doctor the fee, and then the state will bill the federal government for what they would otherwise be paying out in the Veterans Care System. Now, Trump has made a whole lot of progress on the federal side of the VA system. And I'm very grateful for that. I'm obviously a Trump supporter. I like his policies. I agree with the direction he is taking our country. But there's still a lot of work to do, and a lot of that work needs to be done on the state side. There's only so much that the federal government can do, and they're doing way more than they should be doing. We as a state should be doing a lot of that work, but we're pushing that off on the federal government, and we shouldn't be doing that. So I'd like to create a program that will allow Virginia veterans to go to any doctor in the state, primary care, specialty, whatever. I'm very pro marijuana. I believe that will help a lot of our veterans with PTSD pain, and that ties into the economy side of my plan as well. Well, I think we've got other questions about that later. I'll pick up on that. But there's so much more that we need to do for our veterans. We got 22 a day that are taking their lives, and they're going to the VA, they're asking for help, and they're being turned away. Like I said, Trump is making progress, but on the federal level, it's too big for that progress to be, pushed in a manner that it should be. And I think on the state level, we can reduce their federal burden, open it up for veterans service connected to go anywhere in the state, and that's that's a solid plan that I think we can work with.
Thank you so much. Virginia implemented Medicaid expansion in 2019, and more than 494,000 Virginians have gained coverage as a result. You have said you oppose Medicaid expansion, but understand and agree that this service cannot simply be removed. What alternative programs and services would you aim to implement as governor, and what impact would alternatives have on the Commonwealth's budget and taxation rates? How would you work with the General Assembly to implement these alternatives?
So yes, I'm against Medicaid expansion, but that doesn't mean that I don't understand why it's there and why it was needed and what position that has put the people that need to utilize Medicaid right now. So we can't just, cut the cord and say fend for yourself to those people. What we need to do is we need oversight on who's getting Medicaid, why they're getting it, and we need to start to work on policy that is going to transition them from Medicaid into the workforce. And that goes into another question we have later on. But that's a big part. I have family that rely on Medicaid. And I see in a lot of those members that they can go get a job. They can work. There are obstacles in their way that we need to help them fix. And a lot of that is current policy that is in place. It makes them dependent on that check. And it incentivizes them to stay at home. What we need to do is de-incentivize that and incentivize going to work. Incentivize being a productive member of society. Now, for those that really, really need it, we're not going to take it away from you. And that's a big part of having the hard conversations and finding solutions that work for people, not hurt people. And that's why in my statement, I say that I know we just can't cut the cord because I don't want to hurt the people. But we need to find solutions to transitioning away from that. As far as the taxation rate, a lot of that's going to come down to responsible spending in our state. I don't know how many times you're going down a road and it's a perfectly fine road, and then you turn down this other road that's bumpy as heck. A week later you come down and they're repaving the good road, but the bumpy road isn't being touched. Okay, that's a great example of responsible spending. They're spending money where it doesn't need to be spent, and they're ignoring the areas where that money should be spent. Also, setting up contracts so there are deadlines with these companies. They're going to be fined when they don't complete it on time. We're not going to have to give them more money to complete a contract that they bid on. You find a lot of that in our government as well. And, Trump is working on that on the federal side, but again, we got to do it on the state side. Everything that we need to fix in this country starts on the state side, not the federal.
Thank you. And moving into the critical topic of education. Virginia ranks among the top 10 educational systems in the United States, but is facing a critical workforce shortage, and there are currently 1,000 unfilled positions. You have said you will prioritize education as governor. What will be your focus to improve the Commonwealth's public education system?
So again, we need to have the conversations, okay? We need to talk about the ideas that might be a little wild to some, but in reality, once you work through the details, you might find that works better than the current system we're working on or working with. One of the things that is going around the state right now is having the money follow the child. You have a rich neighborhood that, pays a lot of money in taxes, and those schools are having, surplus of funds to teach those students. And then you have the low-income neighborhoods where those students are suffering greatly. There's no heat in their schools. There's no air conditioning. There's mold. They don't have books, supplies. So we need to figure out a way that we can even that out across the state. It doesn't matter if you're in a rich neighborhood or if you're in a poor neighborhood, your school is going to be equally funded. And one of the ways we can look at doing that is a state tax instead of a county tax for school funding. And then, dividing that up by what do we need to pay our teachers while giving them an increase. And believe me, I know they need a pay increase. My wife is a teacher. and saying, okay, if we've got $10,000 a year per kid, we're going to take $2,000 a year per kid. That's going to pay our salaries to our teachers. That's going to pay our employees, our administrative employees. That's going to cover, all the overhead that the schools have. And then you've got, $5,000 per student, and that student that money follows the student. If a student changes schools, the money follows the student. So you're paying out once a month, once a quarter, $1,000 per student. If that student moves to a new school, that new school gets that $1,000 in the next quarter. And that evens it out. That allows the schools to all be on the same playing field. That allows the students to all have an equal education. And that's really important. Teachers, let me tell you, my wife works 70, 80 hours a week at times. And we spend a lot of our personal money to cover her classroom. She lives in a Title I school. And I think, that incentivizes the school to push the kids through rather than focus on the kids. And you've got to start looking at the education program itself. The standards of learning tests, right? The SOLs. You cannot learn how smart or bright a child is by a written test. Let me tell you, my wife has come home and told me, I had a student, and she never violates HIPAA or anything like that. I had a student that I read these questions to, and he answered all of them wrong. But he went back to the classroom, and I said, and she asked him the question again, just a little bit different way, and the kid answered it perfectly. Okay, that's an example of how they standardize something, and then they group this kid and he's a below average student, when in reality the kid's a genius. He just needs to be asked a little bit different. That question just needs to be worded a little bit different. And that goes into line with allowing the school localities to determine how each program is going to work for each student. You can't standardize a school when you have 500 different cultures attending that school. You're standardizing it by one culture, and you've got 500 cultures there. Every one of those students are raised in a different household under a different culture, whether it's white, black, Latino, immigrant, okay? You can't do that. You have to have the flexibility within the school system to adjust for the student. The student should not adjust for the school system.
Mr. Santini, thank you so much for that, and thank you for your wife's service. According to the American Immigration Council, 1 in 8 Virginians are immigrants. 1 in 6 Virginia workers are immigrants. And foreign-born entrepreneurs in Virginia account for 1/5 of the Commonwealth's self-employed business owners. Can you share your position on immigration and what role the Commonwealth should play in that?
So I'm 100% for immigration. My last name came to America in the 1800s, shortly after the Civil War, at the fall of Napoleon. My relative feared persecution and sent his sons to America, and my family has thrived because of it. So I'm 100% for immigration. I want to make that clear. With that being said, our world is in turmoil right now. There are people that are sneaking into our country because we have not secured our borders. And I know a lot of people are against securing our borders, but if you've got a foreign entity that is sneaking into our country and killing American citizens because they disagree with their culture, at some point it's going to affect you. We need to secure our borders while still, we have to reform our immigration altogether, federally. But with that being said, we have a lot of good people that are here illegally, and we need to look at assimilating those good people, not deporting them. We need to make them a part of the community through a legal manner where they are able to pay taxes, they are able to get a 401k, they are able to purchase property, they are able to contribute fully to society. And a lot of these immigrants that are here illegally or undocumented, a lot of people call them undocumented, it doesn't matter your terminology, It's not derogatory one way or the other unless you take it that way. But these immigrants are good people. I've spoken with several of them. There's a gentleman that works at a business close to me. His father is here undocumented. This gentleman is here legally, but his father is here undocumented. And his father contributes to society, pays extra in taxes through his son and his wife. He wants to be here documented, but he's afraid to step forward because he's afraid he's going to be deported, even though he's a really good person and he's been contributing, he's been working, he's been paying taxes on all the goods that he purchases, but he's afraid he's going to get deported. So how do we need to break that stigmatization. We need to come up with a system in our state that says these are bad people, they need to be deported. MS-13, gang members, drug smugglers, child traffickers, all of these people that are here for the wrong reasons need to go. They're hurting America, they're not helping it. They're hurting Virginia, they're not helping it. And we need to look at the people that are here already, that have been here, and find a way to assimilate them. I also believe it's going to be a lot less expensive to make them a part of our society than it is to try to deport them. And if we come up with a plan that says, we're going to accept you for your culture, we're going to make you a part of our country, I think they're going to come forward. And I think they're going to be happy to be a part of America. Most of them are ecstatic to already be here. We are unique as a country within our constitutional republic, the freedoms that our Constitution allows us to have. And you would believe it or not, some of these undocumented immigrants are very upset at the fact that laws are being made that violate the Constitution. And they know this. And they want to be a part of making America great. They don't want to be a part of the negative, rhetoric that comes from one side or the other in regards to immigration.
Thank you so much for that. And to conclude our pre-written questions, I have a few directly related to civic and voter participation in Virginia. So the General Assembly has taken aim at election laws in order to promote more accessible voter participation. This includes removing strict photo ID requirements and expanding early voting. You have called for reinstating strict photo ID requirements as part of your platform. Could you share why this is a priority of your campaign?
So as I was talking earlier with about the border issue, okay? We had Russian interference during Trump's election. We've had interference from other foreign countries in previous elections. This is all documented. This isn't rhetoric to try to rise up a base one way or the other. You can find it both from the Democrat and Republican side of things in our history. Because of that, and because of our borders not being secured, we don't know 100% for sure if our elections have been compromised. And because of the division between one side or the other saying it is compromised, the Republicans saying it's compromised now, and the Democrats saying it was compromised in 2016, that division is causing us an issue. It's causing a problem with trust between our federal agencies. It's causing a problem with trust between our elected officials. This year you're saying there's no issue. Next year you're saying there is. 3 years ago you were saying there was proof of it. And because our borders are not secure, we don't know who's coming from them. We don't know what nefarious plans they have to hurt our country. We need to have a more secure election. We need to have voter ID until we can secure those borders. Once we secure those borders, I think we can move to a platform that will make it easier. But there are solutions that can be found in regards to accessibility. Right now, you have to drive 2-3 miles to your local closest election facility. You have to show your voter ID. Okay, what if we send a mobile unit that goes into the neighborhoods and, takes voters that way? It's an armored truck. It can't be broke into. It can't be violated. We can verify who they are right there. They can fill out the form right there. and it can go into an armored truck where it's not going to be tampered with, and it can go back to a facility where you've got Republicans, Democrats, independent, all verifying the signatures, the photo ID, everything to 100% prove to the people, right, that it's not been tampered with. Right now, the people don't have that proof. Right now, you've got one side saying, look at this, look at that, from the 2016 election, from this year's election. And because of that division, because of that uncertainty from either side, I think what we need to do for this election is move to a contingency vote under the 12th Amendment. We've had to do it 3 times in the history of our country. And I think the division that we're at right now in our country, with enough people saying that they don't trust the election, that's the way this needs to go.
Thank you so much for that answer. Mr. Santini, your opponent, Amanda Chase, has called for the president to institute martial law and to run this, to implement another election. What are your thoughts on that?
She's an opportunist, okay? Any big issue that pops up, she's going to make a big stink out of it, and then she's going to flip-flop on it later. Just like her call to recall Ralph Northam when he was, putting out unconstitutional laws in regards to our Second Amendment. What'd she do? She came out a month later and said, oh, it's too hard, it's too long. By the time we get done, it's going to be too close to the election. Just like she flip-flopped on being a Republican or being an independent. That's what she does. She makes a big issue out of things and tries to rile up the people and get a few more followers. And we don't need martial law. Our Constitution already spells out what we need to do. Like I said, there is enough division in our country that we need to follow the 12th Amendment. Congress needs to vote that this should be put under a contingency vote. That is the only way that we are going to know as a society whether or not our election was fair. Because we're never going to know under the current system of, did Dominion violate our rights? Was there 160,000 votes that were duplicated? Where did the 170,000 votes come from on the disk drive after they closed the election, before they opened it up the next time, after they closed the counting at midnight, before they opened it up the next morning? That division, martial law, that's going to cause more problems than we need. And all we need is to put it to a contingency vote. Follow the laws that we already have in place in our Constitution. The 12th Amendment spells it out. Follow that through. And Congress and our Senate right now should look at all of this division and say, okay, we're not going to just declare Biden the presidency because there's enough people in our country that don't believe that our election was safe and secure, regardless of what Homeland Security is saying, regardless of what all the Democrats are saying in the Democratic Party. There's enough people that are standing up right now saying something is wrong, it doesn't add up, and I don't trust this election. Because of that, we need to move to a contingency vote. That is the only way we're going to know.
Mr. Santini, I think that's all of the questions that we had for today. Thank you so much for joining us. It was truly a pleasure hosting you and an honor. And we wish you great luck in your campaign.
I thank you for having me. Please look me up at santini4ba.com. Email me if you're interested in volunteering or being an intern. Contact Thirsty, THURSTIE, at santini4ba.com. We're here for the people, both Democratic and Republican. And I love Virginia, and I want to do right by the people. And that's only going to happen with you guys stepping up, getting behind me, and making all these dreams come to a reality. Thank you. really great questions, guys. Thank you for having me. Really, really great questions.
Of course, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And if you have any further questions, reach out to me.
Do you think Virginia needs another bearded governor? And how long has it been since we've had a bearded governor?
I do not know how long it's been since we've had a bearded governor, but I think Virginia is going to have another bearded governor. The great thing about me is, yes, I'm a Republican. That's where my morals and values lie. But I'm willing to work towards solutions, okay? I'm willing to have the conversations. I'm willing to open my door once a week and let anybody come in from all walks of life and say, this is the problem, let's figure it out. And I have helped so many people along the way just during my campaign. And I had a guy ask me last night, he was like, you know, why are you staying here till 1:30 in the morning, you know, to help me work on my car? And I said, you know, if I can't help a few people on the way running for governor, how am I going to help anybody once I get there?